Hello, everyone. It has been asked that I reproduce our little lesson on completing the square in order to come up with the quadratic formula. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to write ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 and use completing the square to solve it. But at the same time, I am going to do kind of a concrete example here. I'm going to do, let's say, 4x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals 0. So we can kind of see what the steps look like on real numbers and how the analogy works that I'm doing it with these presumed numbers a, b, and c, these variables. So I'll start over here on the right-hand side, where I will say 4x squared plus 5x is equal to 2. Just moving that constant term to the other side. So I should do that here, where I get ax squared plus bx is equal to move this over, I'm going to have to subtract c from both sides, or add a negative c. Here I added a negative 2. So I added the 2. All right, then I want that lead coefficient to be a 1, so I'm going to divide everything by 4. And I get x squared plus 5 over 4x equals 2 over 4, which I know reduces. But seeing as I won't know how this reduces, I'm not going to reduce it. I'm going to write this as x squared, so I divided everything by a, plus b over a x equals that negative c over a. And that a little bit smaller, but so it goes. Okay, the next step is where I actually complete the square. I take half of this, which is 5 over 8, or 2 times 4, and square it. So here goes x squared plus that same 5 over 4x. Half of this is 5 over 8, and that squared is 25 over 64. And what I add to one side, I should presumably add to the other. Equals 20 plus, the plus sign, 25 over 64. Okay, so doing that over here, I end up with x squared plus b over ax. Nothing's changed so far, but then I add half of this thing squared. Half of b over a is b over 2a, and b over 2a squared is b squared over 4a squared. Equals, I'm going to add it to the front of this one because I think it just looks better, b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. This is a perfect square. This is x plus 5/8 squared. And on the right-hand side, I can find a common denominator by multiplying this guy by 16 over 16. And so I get 32 plus 25 over 64. Mike, oh, you found a duck? Okay, sorry about the pause there. Same thing on this side. I can rewrite the left-hand side of the left-hand side as x plus b over 2a quantity squared equals, and b squared over 4a squared. That common denominator is where I multiply the top and the bottom of this by 4a. So minus 4ac over 4a squared. I'll give you a moment here. Of course, you can pause it and take as long as you want to make sure that this and that, and for that matter, this and that are actually the same thing. You can square out this thing, FOIL it if you will. Make sure you end up with what's on the left-hand side, and just make sure that I did okay on the right-hand side as well. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, remembering, of course, when I do, to add a plus or minus over here. And that is plus or minus the square root of this whole thing. 32 plus 25, that sounds like 57 to me. 57 over 64. Well, over here I get x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus. I remember my plus or minus there as well. The square root of e squared minus 4ac, that sounds somehow familiar, over this 4a squared, which is still in the square root. Okay, back to this side. I'm going to subtract that 5/8 from both sides. At the same time, I'm going to take the square root of the denominator. So I get x equals -5 over 8 plus or minus the square root of 57 over the square root of 64. I know what the square root of 64 is. That's just 8. Back to this side, I get that x equals, so I had to subtract b over 2a, so negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over the square root of 4. Oh, I know what the square root of 4 is. And the square root of a squared. I know what the square root of a squared is. Looking good. Over on my right-hand side, I get that x equals -5 plus or minus square root of 57 all over 8. And on this side, I get what I would hope, x equals -b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And there you have it. The analogy to completing the square in order to derive the quadratic form. Hopefully that helped. Sorry about both the lousy handwriting and the baby interruption. I will catch up with you later.